Over the past few years, we started a new project at the British Museum focusing on animal mummies. We've been using different types of technologies like CT scanning and X-ray to reveal what was inside the mummies, and often for the very first time.
At the British Museum, there are around 500 animal mummies from Egypt. We're going to show you how we scan the mummies, but also look at the data to reveal some really interesting results.
We're trying to look at as much as we can as part of this project, and obviously cultural, religious aspects are very important because that's the basis for everything, to understand how those animals were treated, for example, how they were breeded, how they were killed, how they were embalmed, and we're really trying to look at all the different aspects of the mummification process.
This is our X-ray imaging laboratory, and if we step inside, we have an X-ray tube up here with all the cables coming out of it, and we're going to take an X-ray of the animal mummy now using this detector. This is like a photographic film, but it records X-rays instead of visible light. X-rays come out of the X-ray tube, they pass through the mummy. Some of the X-rays are absorbed, some of them aren't absorbed, and that information allows us to build up a picture of what is inside the wrappings without disturbing the wrappings. This over here is a digital detector. When we use the X-rays in a horizontal direction, we use this detector instead. So our lab is very unique, it's versatile, and it means that we can safely manipulate objects or mummies into the best position to X-ray them.
Usually when we start X-raying a mummy, we have an idea of what's going to be inside. I mean, the shape of the mummy gives an indication of the type of animal we're going to find inside. That being said, sometimes it doesn't match. For example, not that long ago, we scanned what was described as a cat, and it was a dog.
Here we have the X-ray of the cat, but it's not a full cat. You can see we don't have any of the paws really. Sometimes we get full cats, which is lovely, or full animals, but often it's part of animals or there might be some pieces missing. I think potentially that, you know, as part of the kind of ritual process of making the mummy, you don't need the full animal. It's fine just to have the wing or to have a part of the animal that can then be a representation of the whole. And often the point of mummification and the look of the animal might be more important.
So now we're using a digital detector, so it's a lot quicker. It gives us a real-time picture. We can move the X-ray tube and the detector around the mummy, and then we can see what's happening inside whilst we rotate. This is a bull's head. So here are the teeth. And you can also see here what is maybe a metal pin inside.
I am currently packing about 26 mummies, which we are going to take to the hospital for CT scanning. We have a definite ibis mummy here and here. We have a very small crocodile. We have a falcon. So over here is my slightly more challenging packing. I'm hoping it's a complete crocodile. This piece has never actually been X-rayed or CT scanned before. I always found this guy quite intriguing and interesting to me. It's quite obvious what he is. So he's a falcon. Before I really started working with animal mummies, I really kind of thought of them as like very well wrapped, like this example of an ibis. With this guy, obviously you've got the wrapping that is going on, but you have his beak and his eye socket here actually protruding. Right at the end where the wrapping is missing, you do have examples of the actual tail feathers still in place. I know that Egyptian material kind of preserves very well, but the amount of animal mummies I've been working with where I've been surprised where feathers and fur are actually still in place kind of blew my mind for like material that this old. Not that you can have a favourite, but he's just quite emotive, especially just seeing the beak and seeing the feathers.
Once the mummies were safely packed, we took them to the Royal Brompton Hospital in London to be CT scanned, and that's when things got really interesting.
Today we have 25 animal mummies. We X-rayed quite a lot of them, so we have an idea of what's going on, and for some of them we have further questions. And for others, we want slightly higher definition, and that's what CT scan is going to provide us.
Inside a CT scanner, an X-ray tube and detector spins around the object as it passes through the scanner. During scanning, X-ray slices are created. Later, this data can be processed to produce alternative two-dimensional views or detailed 3D renders.
With the X-ray, you have all the different layers into one image. You're very limited in terms of what you're going to be able to see and to explore. With a CT, you can have like several thousand slices, and it also means that you can really look in far more detail at all the different elements. You can remove the different types of densities, which means that maybe you can look at only the skeleton if you wanted to. The one that hasn't been X-rayed is the one that's going to be CT scanned first. It's a quite large crocodile, 2 meters long, but we don't know what's going on inside. I imagine there is a crocodile, but I might be proven wrong.
A regular day would be scanning cardiac and lung patients here at the Royal Brompton. Today is very different. I've never done it before, scanning mummies.
Okay, so that's all the reed, and the crocodile is here.
Yeah.
Head, body,
Spine.
yeah, but there are other things going on.
And
Yeah, you
another
have the
one
one.
there. And another one.
All right.
I think.
Okay, you're all right. I thought there would be one large crocodile, but Emma thought that maybe there would be more than one. For what we can see on half of the scan, there are at least 4.
Oh, yeah?
3, 4.
So not one big
No,
one?
not
No.
one big one.
Sometimes in crocodile mummies, we find there's a whole crocodile, and sometimes it's a surprise. Today was a surprise. Also, that what looks to be maybe some smaller, tiny baby crocodiles, and there's also 2 larger kind of packages as part of the mummification process, which are around the head of the mummy rather than the head of the crocodiles, which we still need to investigate.
The scanning is like a minute. It goes super fast. The work after that is much slower, but it's also really exciting because every time you look at something, every time you see something a bit different and you understand it a bit better. So now we are back at the museum after having scanned the mummies at the hospital, and we're going to look at the CT scan data on the computer here.
Today, we're going to look at 3 mummies that we thought were very interesting and share with you what we've learned about the mummification process and also what they tell us about Egyptian culture. And here on the screen, we have 3 different views of the mummy from the 3 different dimensions, which we can use to investigate through the different slices from the CT scan. And if we go into one of the views here, we can actually go all the way through the mummy.
And the 4th view is a 3D rendering using all the data together. You can see the external surface of the mummy, but by using the software, you can actually remove some of the layers and discover what's inside. So this is the first mummy we're actually going to look at, and it's a mummy that we've seen at the CT scan session. When we start looking at it a bit more closely, you can see there's different types of materials and layers. For example, here you have some rope, and that rope is there to maintain all the different layers together, and you have the rope visible on different parts of the mummy. And here you have 2 other elements, and you can see them a bit more clearly here on top. They seem to represent the eyes of the crocodile.
They are made from textile, and the textile is quite dense, so it's probably impregnated with an embalming substance to make them a bit harder to keep the shape of the eyes for the mummy.
And now we removed the layer that we've just seen. What we have under that layer is quite a lot of different palm branch, and you can see them running all along the mummy of that crocodile. If we remove that layer and we go even further inside, we discovered something that we were not really expecting, which is not one crocodile, but several of them. And I'm just going to show you the heads here. So you have one head. The second is here. The third one is slightly hidden behind the second one. And the 4th one is actually upside down, and you can see its head here on the tail side of the crocodile mummy.
They are in what we would call the juvenile state. So they're above a year old, but not yet fully developed. And now we're going to look at a cross-section of the crocodile, and it will be here within the crocodile mummy. And here you can see on the bottom, there's 3 of the larger crocodiles that we saw on the 3D model. And then above the crocodiles, you can see lots of small babies. And these were not visible on the other view because they're quite low density and it wouldn't show up on the 3D model. They have been wrapped in bundles, and these bundles seem to have been used to kind of help shape the larger crocodile mummy. And amazingly, we found out that there was 66 in total, so 4 big crocodiles and 62 babies within this one package. It is an amazing amount of crocodiles and something that we have never seen before, that many crocodiles within one mummy, and something that you probably wouldn't be able to see from X-ray, so it's why CT scanning is really important for understanding these mummies.
It's quite difficult to know exactly what was the purpose of having so many animals within one bundle. In some cases, mummified animals were offered to their respective gods, and that's what we called a votive offering. Crocodiles are often associated to the god Sobek, and Sobek is often depicted as either as a full crocodile or as a human shape with a crocodile head. And we think that quite a lot of the mummified crocodiles were originally associated to that god or to one form of the god Sobek. Sobek was a god of fertility, was also linked to the royal power. This is the mummy of a bovine, and you can see again the 3 different views.
If we zoom in a little bit here, we can see the teeth of the bovine. The molars are still developing in the crypts, and that means that this animal was around between 6 and 12 months old.
The mummy is covered with a layer of textile, but underneath you have different types of material. And now we remove more layers, and you can see the pile of bones that form the body and the head on top. And actually, what we discovered is that all those bones were really decoratively placed on top of a grate made of different pieces of wood that would help to shape and to model the mummy. Mummies of bovine are quite different in terms of how they were modeled. The way they were mummified and the fact that you don't have the soft tissues, they probably need a bit more structure. Bulls and bovines in ancient Egypt can be linked to quite a lot of different gods. In this case, when you look at the mummy itself, you can see a small triangle on the forehead, which gives an indication this mummy was probably associated to the Apis bull. The Apis bull was a living manifestation of the god Ptah. There were usually one bull at any one time, and that bull was a representation of the god, was considered as a god on earth. In this case, we know that this bull was associated to the Apis, but was probably not one of those Apis bulls. It was probably just a way to connect to the Apis bull and to the god Ptah through it.
Here is the 3rd mummy we'd like to present to you. It's a mummy of a cat. The mummy of the cat is quite large. It is 44 centimeters long, but the actual skeletal remains inside are very small. So it's actually a kitten, and that is only 11 centimeters tall. And now we're going to zoom in a little bit closer onto the skeletal remains. And here you can see the skull at the top, which has been crushed, but that's probably due to the mummification process, and also the spine. Due to the very small size of this kitten, we're unable to see the teeth and the bones in much detail, so we can't say accurately what the age is, but due to the size and the shape of the kitten, it's probably under a month old.
So we are back here on the view where you can see the entire mummy, and what you can see is here the remains of the kitten. The person who produced it decided to start by wrapping the remains of the cat first, and then to add another layer, and you can see here these elements at the bottom, to create a second bundle, and did that again a 3rd time and a 4th time to reach the full length of the mummy as we have it now. Quite a lot of the remains that were mummified belong to quite young animals. And I think that tells quite a lot about the practice of mummifying animals in ancient Egypt. When you start looking at remains that were found in Egypt at catacombs, we're not talking about a few dozens or hundreds of mummies, we're talking about millions. It's a practice that had a massive impact in terms of the industry, the local economy, and the trade. I hope you enjoyed this journey of discovery with us.
If you want to learn more about animal mummies, you can come and visit the galleries here at the British Museum.